Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. Iran has launched missile attacks targeting a US military base in Qatar that houses thousands of personnel. Donald Trump said there have been no casualties. The strikes were in retaliation for US forces bombing 3 Iranian nuclear sites. Ukraine's president has told Sky News Russia will have time to build a new army if NATO countries fail to quickly increase their defence spending. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, will prescribe protest group Palestine Action, making membership or support for the group illegal after members of Palestine Action broke into RAF Bryce Norton last week, spraying military planes with red paint. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and the Daily Mail's Whitehall editor Claire Ellicott. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, most of the newspapers lead on Iran's response to US strikes. The Times front page reports on how the limited attack was telegraphed in advance, enabling the Qatari military to intercept most of the missiles. Iran attack on US air bases leaves the Middle East on edge is the Guardian's take on this latest development. And you can see the missile interceptor above Doha on the front page. Topple the Ayatollahs is the Metro's headline, as the paper reports on Donald Trump hinting at possible regime change in Iran. The Financial Times reports on Iran firing a barrage of missiles on a US military base in Qatar, with a picture from the Iranian War Command Room. The Eye says the UK government has hardened its language towards Iran as Britain prepares to join military action in the Middle East. The Mail, meanwhile, poses a question for the Prime Minister on its front page as it claims Sir Keir Starmer risks being marginalised on the world stage after failing to back Donald Trump's strikes against Iran. The Sun leads on its own investigation into Channel migrants working as fast food delivery riders. And we are joined tonight by columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and the Daily Mail's Whitehall editor Claire Ellicott. Welcome to you both. Let us start with the Guardian front page, entirely taken up by Iran's attack on the US airbase. Their suggestion there that it does leave the Middle East on the edge. Would you agree with that, Steve?
Well, it's been on the edge for quite a few days now. What's interesting about this story's too trivial a term, this crisis, this international crisis, is it's quite hard for news outlets to keep up with all the various twists and turns. So we had the drama of the Iran attack, which rightly leads a lot of the newspapers. But as you've been reporting, we've had Trump's response, which suggested two things. First of all, they were given notice, and that it was a relatively, in inverted commas, mild attack where no one was killed. And there is some suggestion, which you've been exploring here on Sky this evening, that there was a kind of symbolism to the whole thing, that Iran felt they had to do something. They didn't want to provoke Trump, and Trump has responded by, for him, lowering the temperature of his tweets, or whatever they're called on Truth Social.
Yeah, Truth Social.
By saying, he said, look, thank you for letting us know about this. Now, who knows where all this is going to lead next? It's a tinderbox. But with Trump's public statements, you can read something into it. And I think this is an attempt to sort of lower the temperature in the hope that perhaps what they did will turn out to be a one-off rather than the beginning of a nightmare. We don't know, he doesn't know. But that's the suggestion, I think, from what you've been reporting him as saying.
Claire, do you think that he has been able to dial down the escalation with that social media post thanking Iran for the early notice of the attack?
Well, I think we started the evening on the kind of verge of World War III and wondering what would happen and not knowing whether any of these missiles would actually get through the shield, what would actually happen, how on what scale Iran's kind of counterattack would be. And we're ending the evening in what feels like a calmer place, and Donald Trump thanking Iran for prior notice on Truth Social is quite telling, because it's calming language from him. Seems like he's talking about peace again. And this is the president who told us he didn't want to be getting into foreign wars. And all of this didn't fit very comfortably with that. So it does sound like the rhetoric's being dialed down. The statements from Iran are similarly calmer. And the reality with this attack is that nothing has actually happened. No one was hurt. All of the missiles were intercepted. They said they also attacked Iraq as well as Qatar, but there doesn't seem to be any evidence that did happen. But
although the Guardian is reporting that an Iraqi security official said that the Iranian missiles had targeted Ain al-Assad base, where US troops are deployed. This is in western Iraq, and another report suggested that 6 missiles had been fired at the base. So we're not quite sure.
Yes, we're not quite sure. I think America was saying they didn't think that happened. So it feels like we're ending the evening in a calmer place, and I think, you know, probably the tit for tat between Israel and Iran will continue. We don't know how that kind of ends, but the prospect of America and Iran being drawn into a huge war, and with all their proxies and American allies, it seems like a further away prospect than it did earlier. So we have to just hope that this is kind of the end of this stage of it, at least.
Although we do wonder, when we look at one social media post from Donald Trump, whether the rhetoric is actually dialing up the extent of the conflict, in which he says it's not politically correct to use the term regime change. But if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, in capitals, why wouldn't there be a regime change?
So this is what I think he is, in his own unique way, a guy. People say, oh, you have no idea what he's thinking. You do. And clearly he would prefer a change of regime. It's almost the opposite of the build-up to Iraq, where Bush, Blair and others had to pretend they didn't want regime change. It was all about the weapons, whereas they did want regime change in Iraq. Here he says what he thinks. He wants a change of regime, but then he'll say later, that's not the war aim. I think it would be great if Iran was great again and with a new regime. So he says what he thinks. So that's one of the things he would like.
It is conflicting information, though, that he's giving. It's contradictory, what he says.
I think information is elevating some of these things. But it is
contradictory opinions.
He thinks what he thinks and says quite often what he thinks. So, yeah, he would want a change of regime, but I think if he was asked about it tomorrow, as he probably will be when he sits in his chat show sofa in the White House, he will say that's not the aim, and he hopes to get the talks going again. But, you know, as you're discovering with rolling news on this, it's difficult. We're all kind of still in the dark about how this is going to develop. It could still be, as Claire was saying, a few hours ago, it looks as if we're on the edge of World War III, and now it's a bit calmer. It could turn again very easily.
Yeah.
That's the danger of a military action like this. Everything erupts into unanswered questions.
Yeah,
so we're trying to navigate our way through it.
The Metro looking at that change of regime question, their headline, topple the Ayatollahs, Claire.
Yeah, so I think one thing that is interesting, Steve touched on this, is that the papers go to press earlier than some of the news develops, and the Metro goes to press quite early. And at this point, this headline was very true, that it did seem like, you know, Trump wanted regime change. It all felt very tense. It all felt, you know, really on the edge. And I think the trouble here is that Donald Trump says one thing, that he thinks, you know, there should be a regime change in Iran. And then White House officials clarify it. His ministers try to clarify it. And I think he said again that he thinks it should be for the people of Iran to stage any kind of uprising. But it's clear that he is, you know, stoking some tension there in Iran and hopes for change.
Steve, let's bring this question back to the UK. The Mail, if we take a look at that front page, they're asking the question of Sir Keir Starmer, whose side are you on? Why?
Well, I think we should preface it by saying the Daily Mail is no fan of this government or Keir Starmer. He is navigating a high-wire act for lots of reasons. One, Britain has very little agency in any of this, but you have to pretend, as a Prime Minister, you are a key figure in it. America is a huge player. The European leaders aren't, and Netanyahu has ignored the European leaders, and Trump went in to do this Iran assault without really consulting European allies. He wants to keep in with Trump, but he's been advised, for example, that if Britain got involved, it could break international law. And he, rightly in my view, it's becoming increasingly unfashionable, is a committed supporter of international law. So you can see the dilemmas around him. He also leads a party which is deeply sceptical post the trauma of Iraq, all their doubts about Gaza and the horrors in Gaza. So he's doing that without wanting to alienate Trump. It's a genuinely tough position. Yeah. And ambiguity is what they're playing at the moment. They might not be able to do it for much longer.
Indeed.
But they're trying it.
And when we look at the eye, Claire, we read that Foreign Secretary David Lammy says Britain's now prepared to join military action to defend, in quotes, our allies and partners in the Middle East.
Yes, I think this is very much a kind of future suggestion, because he was very clear today that Britain played no part in this attack, and that Britain was only informed very shortly before the attack that it was happening. And this is Trump's attack on Iran. And I think there have been lots of questions today about the base, Diego Garcia, and whether that would have been easier for the US to have launched strikes from there. Obviously, they chose not to do that. They chose to refuel fighter jets in the air and go miles and miles and miles and fly from a base in Missouri. So it really feels like Britain is not. It's not Iraq again. Britain is not involved at this stage.
And you spoke to Rachel Reeves, who said that to you this morning.
And I think what this front page is getting at is that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves and David Lammy have not said that they think what Donald Trump has done is right, and they've not said that they think it's legal. And there's been a very clear message from the government that we are going to really carefully skirt around this. And there are questions as well, because Keir Starmer obviously said that he didn't think that there would be attacks on Iran, and he didn't think that Trump would bomb Iran, and then Trump goes ahead and does it.
Which is quite embarrassing for him.
It's embarrassing, and, you know, they're our closest ally, and even though, you know, there's great news on the kind of beginnings of a trade deal last month, there are questions about how close how important Britain is.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Claire and Steve, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break coming up. King Charles hosts Ukraine's president ahead of NATO leaders meeting this week against the backdrop of international conflict. We'll be discussing that when we come back.
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We'd been warned that we would meet people in the lowest moment of their lives.
Their story is one of fundamental American failure. Well, a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club, but I have to say there are more media here than there are supporters.
We love Trump!
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. This is just the audience that Joe Biden wanted.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important, it's at the heart of the issue.
For all the talk of a toned-down, humbled Trump, yes, maybe there was just a little less rhetoric, a little less divisiveness, but in the end it was the same rhythm, the same speech, the same man.
All them people that died in Russia and Ukraine, they'd still be alive today if Donald Trump was the president.
If it was my wish, have a businessman that's strong like Trump, but maybe just doesn't say as much, you know?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What we've been allowed to see over here is a humanitarian corridor. Free wherever you get your news.
A young American medical student is making remarkable things happen.
I've seen a lot of difficult things, and honestly, it breaks my heart. These children don't deserve that.
I don't think there's a single Arab I know who isn't seriously disturbed by what's going on.
And so they gathered for this wonder of nature.
I'm very excited right now.
This is an extraordinary moment beyond anything I could have expected. Sky News, get the full story first.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force. It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. With me now, the columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and the Daily Mail's Whitehall editor Claire Ellicott. Let's have a look at the Times, going inside, page 3. We see there the photo of the King and President Zelensky, because the King is hosting President Zelensky ahead of the NATO summit, which begins tomorrow. Steve?
I think his role, the King's role, I mean, I'm usually not that interested in what royal family people are getting up to, but it's very interesting the degree to which he has been used, or willingly, not used is the wrong word, has been involved in sending signals about Zelensky in Ukraine. The last time they met was days after that row in the White House with Trump and others, giving him a hellish time. And if you remember, he then came to London and immediately was invited to see the King. It was a very symbolic retort to the White House. And here he is again, very ostentatiously, giving a great deal of time up to Zelensky. So he is playing a role in all of this, which is interesting, I think. I kind of admire him for it. I think he's interested in a whole range of things, the environment and so on. But this is clearly something he's willing to do. But it is quite, there's a message in it.
Yes, and we saw the shots of President Zelensky before going to the palace when he met the Speaker of the House, Lindsay Hoyle, was warmly embraced by him. There definitely is a message being sent out to the international community as to where we stand.
Yeah, and
President Zelensky.
Where he stands, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel sorry for President Zelensky because the Middle East is really overshadowing what's happening in Ukraine. And he's in the UK, and that would normally be very big news, but it's been completely wiped off the front pages because of the attacks in the Middle East. And he is going to struggle, NATO starts tomorrow. He's going to struggle to make his case. And I don't think he really even gets a big role at NATO. He's going to really struggle to make his case as to, getting assistance in the ongoing war in Russia, and Trump's really turned his focus from that to the Middle East. And there's no, there was an attack in Russia. Russia fired 352 drones yesterday and 16 missiles at Ukraine, killing at least 10 civilians, including 7 in Kyiv. That used to be very big news, but it's just been knocked down the news agenda. And Zelensky's doing everything he can to keep interest, but it's just not having the same impact.
But it all interconnects, and it's why it's so dangerous. So Putin has declared his support for Iran today, hasn't he? And there he is still in this battle with Ukraine. And so this is a dangerous period in world history where alliances are colliding in different parts of the world. That happened in the build-up to I'm not saying it's going to be the same, but that happened in the build-up to the First World War.
We spoke exclusively to President Zelensky. Mark Austin, my colleague, spoke to him earlier, and one of the things that was quite striking is that he said that within the next 5 years that Russia would potentially attack a NATO country. That was his prediction.
Yeah, well, that reinforces what I was saying, really, that how dangerous things are. I mean, to some extent, he would say that because he really wants to get the sort of buttress of certainly European support, but we've run out of time.
We've run out of time. Thank you both. We'll see you at the top of the 11. Thank you.